Thanks very much. Thanks for our audience for being here for this last panel of the first day of the 10th CESRAN International Conference. This year marks my fifth year relationship with the conference that amounts almost to a marriage, more or less. So, so thanks. So it's a good opportunity for celebrating the conference. And this will be a hybrid panel. So we count on with 5 presentations. 2 will be online. The first from Carlo Frappi. Carlo, are you online? Yeah? Yeah. Carlo is my colleague at Ca' Foscari University of Venice. So this is a family face. And afterwards, we'll have a presentation from Assistant Professor Roxana Andrei and Dimitar Atanasov here at my right side. And the third presentation will be from Associate Professor Belén Perianes. Belén, no está? Isn't here? Sorry, but I'm mixing the languages, so sometimes it's hard. And the fourth one by Iancu, Miruna, Mădălina, and Moldovan Bogdaa. And the last one, last but not least, of course, from Farian Sabahi, another dear friend from University of Insubria in Varese, Italy. So now, Carlo, we will hold all the presentations. At the end, we will gather the questions from the audience, if you agree. So now we move on with the first presentation. So Carlo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Marco. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So thanks again for the friendly and warm presentation, and let me also thank organizers for having me here today. Of course, I regret I didn't have the opportunity to join you in person, but I mean, hopefully we will have chance to meet sooner rather than later. So going to my speech without losing too much time. My speech today focuses on one of the oldest and still unrealized pipeline project in the Eurasian area. This is the so-called Trans-Caspian gas pipeline, a quite ambitious project. In its initial design, it should have carried around 30 billion cubic meter, more or less half of Italian annual consumption, just to provide you with an idea. And I'm at linking gas-rich Turkmenistan to Azerbaijan and through Azerbaijan to Western market through the Caspian Sea. So after many years of kind of silence around the project, 2 sets of events resulted in a kind of return of interest in the realization of the Trans-Caspian pipeline. The first one is the kind of new diplomatic entente among the Caspian littoral states. The Caspian littoral states in general, and between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan in particular. And they resolve also to work together, along with Turkey, by the way, toward the construction of the pipeline. The second event, needless to say, is the urgency for the EU to reinvent its gas import sources and channels in the aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, resulting itself in the decision to end gas import from Russia by 2027. So such an urgency ended up in breathing new life into infrastructure projects, which until the outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian war, proved to be not solid enough either economically or politically to overcome the, let's say, study phase. So the idea here is to try to analytically assess the chance for this decade-long project to be realized in the current energy scenario, a scenario which is shaped first and foremost by the reorientation of the regional gas trade flows. So to do that, I'll be focusing first on what kind of impact we may see the conflict in Ukraine is having on both energy economics and energy politics on the one hand, and on the other hand, I will be focusing on if and how this changing scenario may impact on the realization of the pipeline. So, starting from the first point, repercussions of the conflict in Ukraine. Let's say that beyond the short-term repercussions of the conflict on both, of course, availability and prices of natural gas, of which we are all well aware, I guess. If we take a quick look at energy politics in the Eurasian area, what we see very, how to say, briefly, is its main gas importer, namely the EU as a whole, attempting to get rid of its main supplier, namely Russia. And in the same and opposite way, we do have the main Eurasian gas producer progressively losing its main market, the EU, and therefore in need to find new ways to protect its own energy security through the diversification of export. The combined result of this is basically the already mentioned reorientation of gas flow, shaped by, I would say, analogous yet opposite diversification challenge. So the need for the EU to diversify supplier and Russia to diversify markets. A challenge which, by the way, it's all the more deep as their infrastructure link are rigid. First of all, pipeline. So behind, let's say, this rather, I would say, also obvious and superficial picture, we may descry another rather important trend from my point of view, which helps us in looking at the current crisis under another perspective. So the idea here is basically that the energy crisis resulting from the war has, of course, deeper roots. The EU and its member states got to the crisis basically unprepared. And this was the result of two sets of reasons. First, we got to 2022, to February 2022, coming from an era which we may call of gas abundance, an era of excess, in a way, of offer of gas, where there were no incentives at all for operators in the market to invest in new production or in new transportation capacity. I mean, energy politics, this is the classical problem resulting from the cyclical nature of energy investment. On the other hand, EU was unprepared also as the result, and this is the most important point from my view, as a result of what we may call the interdependence illusion. What I would like to say here is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine marked first and foremost the crisis of the idea, or the illusion, if you prefer, that the responsibility for defining relation with Russia could be left primarily to the market. That is, that the role, let's say, of politics, the role of diplomacy could be almost entirely left to the market, building upon exactly the idea of interdependence between consumer and producers. So, in a way, in February 2022, we as Europeans suddenly discovered two main things. First, that the market-first approach to relation with Russia, and thus interdependence, was incapable of deterring Moscow from pursuing a kind of regressive and revolutionary approach to international relations, just to borrow words from Bobolo. Secondly, that this the resulting business as usual approach to Russia, which, by the way, was the rule also after 2014 Crimean crisis, ended up in funding the war in Ukraine. And if we wanted a broader look, also in fostering the Russian regressive and revolutionary approach itself. Therefore, we may say that the Ukrainian conflict resulted in the need to rethink, reimagine the relation and the balance between market and diplomacy, market and politics, limiting the role of the former and giving somehow space back to the latter. So actually, from my point of view, this is the most important lesson, of course, as far as energy politics is concerned, resulting from the war. And remaining on this dichotomy between market and diplomacy and moving to the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline, what is interesting noting about it is that the whole Trans-Caspian gas pipeline saga, which, by the way, started in Bill Clinton's White House before moving to Brussels at the beginning of the century, is that this dichotomy between market and politics helps in a way clarifying the reason behind the failure to build the gas pipeline. Or if you want, if you prefer, it is exactly in the mismatch between market and diplomacy where the primary reason for the lack of realization of the pipeline lies. So, to put it in simple words, when market conditions were favorable for the construction of the pipeline, political ones were not, and the other way around. This is why I call it a kind of mismatch. The first case, so favorable market condition, but not diplomatic one, was the case during the first decade of the century. In this phase, and on the backdrop of the attempt of the EU to diversify its import gas supply channel and sources, the pipeline was seen as a natural segment of the so-called southern gas corridor of the European Union. Still, regional diplomacy didn't help in that, because we may discuss this later if you want, so-called Turkmenistan defensive stance. So this is a label given by European Commission, not by me. So resulting from Ashgabat's unwillingness to get involved in infrastructure building or to open up its gas sector to international investors. Resulting also from Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan incapability to solve their maritime border disputes in the Caspian, but also not less importantly, from the staunch opposition to the project on the part of Russia and Iran, which could count on not so well defined, let's say, legal status of the Caspian. So in such circumstances, EU efforts, even the most advanced and unprecedented one, we may discuss the kind of political investment that the European Commission did make in the realization of the process, were nevertheless doomed to fail. This kind of window of opportunity closed in the second decade of the century, exactly as we entered an era of gas abundance. Such an era made investment in huge transportation projects commercially unfeasible. And also, this is quite important point, gave birth to a kind of producer syndrome instead of the classical consumer one shaping energy politics. So in the abundance era, the burden to invest in infrastructure was no more on the shoulders of the consumers eager to reach the field, but rather on producers' shoulder eager to save or improve their quota in the market. It's not by chance that if we have a southern gas corridor today, it's just because of Azerbaijani, so producing country investment. Otherwise, we in Italy would have no Azerbaijani gas here, and also Turkish investment there. Still, so in such circumstances, even at a time when Caspian regional diplomacy started sending quite encouraging signals about the possibility to solve the long-standing dispute that previously hindered the construction of the pipeline. I'm referring to the 2018 Convention on the Caspian Sea legal status, as well as on the to the 2021 solution of the border dispute between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan. So these kind of signals came definitely too late, because the implementation of such ambitious infrastructure projects based on long-term commitment between exporters and importers were no longer consistent with market conditions, shaped by growing flexibility, growing diversification, growing interconnection, quite important from the European point of view. So also maybe because aware of this kind of limitation, and perhaps even in a way this illusion following years of unsuccessful attempt to open up the corridor, the EU itself in 2021 even decided to remove the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline from the project of common interest list, which may be supported also financially by the European Union. So on this
sorry, Carlo, try to go to conclusions within 1 minute.
Okay, I will take it too, if I can. The Ukrainian conflict just apparently bridged this mismatch. Because the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the breakdown in energy relations between Russia and the EU resulted in a conjunctural crisis for the EU, which nonetheless doesn't change the broader structural trend of the gas sector. We do have a short-term urgency to adapt our energy import system to this new challenge, but this does not change structural parameters of the gas sector, which is shaped by an offer that not the need to reinvent the way to import it. It's still sufficient to satisfy European demand. So, and going to the conclusion, there is a clear need to define a new balance between market and diplomacy. And since the beginning of the war, diplomacy or politics somehow recovered some ground it had lost in the previous decade. But still, the market rules and logic are still in control of the energy game. So the perfect storm now affecting European gas market, although impactful, of course, should be considered as merely conjunctural, not able to affect the market fundamentals, which still impede the Trans-Caspian pipeline to turn from dream to reality. In 2 words, it will not be the current gas crisis in Europe, nor the positive signals coming from the Caspian energy diplomacy to breathe new life into this long-standing attempt to build the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline. Thanks for the attention.
Thanks very much, Carlo. Thanks very much, and stay with us for the Q&A at the end of the panel. And I asked all the panelists to contain their presentations within 15 minutes, and maybe we will have some extra time, depends on one of the panelists that is still missing so far. So now the floor goes to Roxana, Andrei, and Dimitar Atanasov from CESRAN2023. That is a research center of the Lisbon Institute University, where I am affiliated to as a research assistant. So the floor is yours.
Can you guys put the presentation up? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And because the time is really strict, we decided to jump straight into the topic with Dimitar today. Just a brief idea, what we are researching together about is the protection of the offshore critical energy infrastructure in Europe in the aftermath of the Nord Stream explosions and the war in Ukraine. And we want to see who exactly has the right and the intention to defend and to protect. Is it the EU, is it NATO, or who else can do it? So, Dimitar.
Thank you. So the EU's energy security was put at high risk after the 24th of February 2022, since because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, energy supplies from the Russian Federation to the European Union were completely cut off in some cases, or partially cut off. Like the completely cut off, a good example of it are Bulgaria and Poland. But these worries, these insecurities in the EU reached a boiling point in like new qualitative point with the September 2022 sabotage of explosions of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines that ran beneath the Baltic Sea and connected Russia to Germany. It is really interesting to note that an event on such a massive scale concerning international critical energy infrastructure had never happened before. But what do we talk about when we talk about critical energy infrastructure? Anyways, let's get the terminology out of the way. So the EU's definition of it is an asset or system which is essential for the maintenance of vital societal functions, health, safety, security, economic or well-being of people, and the disruption or destruction of which have a significant impact on at least 2 member states. It's important to mention here that there is national definitions of critical energy infrastructure, and there is a European one, and the European one, it mentions at least 2 member states, so this is important to know. And NATO's definition is a nation's infrastructure, assets, facilities, systems, networks, and processes that support the military, economic, political, and or social life on which a nation and or NATO depends. That's important. We're going to come back on that later. And when we talk about, just a second, I'm sorry. Oh, when we talk about offshore, what do we mean? Well, just a second. When we talk about offshore critical infrastructure, we mean critical energy infrastructure, which is situated in the territorial sea, the exclusive economic zone, or the continental shelf of a member state within the meaning of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Why is offshore critical energy infrastructure so relevant nowadays in the context of the war in Ukraine? Well, first of all, most of the gas and oil production, European production, takes place nowadays offshore in the seas and the oceans of the European Union. Also, 30% of all new wind installations are offshore, and more are going to deploy in the next year as a part of the green energy transition of the EU. But also very important, all the power that is produced offshore needs subsea cables in order to bring this energy onshore, and also all the islands of Europe, like Malta, for example, Cyprus, depend on these subsea submarine power cables. And also in the future, the EU plans to deploy even more offshore infrastructure, such as hydrogen, or we have new developments with tidal power, wave power, including here in Portugal. And what is the big difference? I don't know why we have this red sign here. We have a bug.
I'm sorry.
What's going on?
Yeah.
I think we have some trolls during our... I'm sorry, I'm going just to continue with this slide. So what is the difference between offshore and onshore energy? Where offshore critical energy infrastructure is more difficult to protect because of its location. Most of the installations are located remotely in the deep sea, and because of geography, of course, and also because of meteorological conditions, they are more difficult to access in a timely manner, because time matters when we have to intervene. But also there is a different legal regime that is governing the structures. Dimitar already mentioned the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea, which makes it more ambiguous at times because it poses limits on who has the right to defend. How long can the army of a country, for example, go? Can it go beyond the territorial waters? Because most of these installations are located outside of the territorial waters. And this is a question for which we still do not have an answer within the EU. Who and when has the right to go and defend them?
Can we put the next slide? Yeah, thank you. But now we have a new threat landscape to critical energy infrastructure, which can come from physical threats, as the example given the Nord Stream 1 and 2 explosions. It can come from cyber threats stemming from the fact that critical energy infrastructure is becoming more and more digitalized, and from hybrid threats, which is both. And all of them were exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. But which are the actors on the scene? Well, we have the state and state-sponsored actors, like the state is obvious, but the state-sponsored ones. A good example could be the infamous Russian paramilitary-sponsored Wagner group. We have transnational actors, which could be, well, we can give an example of terrorist organizations, and we have the private and non-private actors. It's interesting to underline that some of the European critical energy offshore infrastructure is owned by private companies, which sometimes are reluctant to share information with national governments or the EU on it.
And why we discuss about EU and NATO? I'm not sure how many of us are aware on the day-to-day basis that the military, the defense infrastructure completely depends on the civilian one. The army does not have its own energy infrastructure. An army does not own its own gas and oil or electricity networks. So if you can imagine, in a case of an imminent or recurring attack on the civilian infrastructure, also the army has to be impacted. And sometimes in an extreme scenario, of course, it can be rendered into incapacity to act, because imagine without electricity, it's very difficult to act in a timely manner. We can have, let's say, oil-based generators in a military camp, but they can last up to 48 hours, and not everything can be solved with the generators. And with it identified 4 main hotspots in the seas and the oceans of the EU: the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, Mediterranean Sea, and North Sea Atlantic zone. And very briefly, I'm going to tell you the challenges we identified, the threats and risks in each one of them. So the Baltic Sea has become notorious last year in September when the Nord Stream pipelines exploded. The explosion, interestingly, took place just a day before another pipeline, this time EU-supported, the Baltic pipe, was officially inaugurated. Now, this new pipe is bringing gas from Norway through Denmark to Poland, and in the near future to other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, like Slovakia or even Ukraine. And so it raises questions: which was the target? Was it the Nord Stream? Was it the new pipeline? And also in the Baltic Sea, we have a specific situation. It's a very congested maritime space. There are many vessels, commercial vessels, military vessels, civilian vessels around, but also we have the legitimate presence of the Russian Navy due to its exclave of Kaliningrad. Russia has the right to be in the Baltic Sea as well. In the Black Sea, you cannot see the title here. Well, no need to say more. We have an ongoing war. And you can see here on the map, just left west to the red area, it's the exclusive economic zone of Romania. Romania is the main producer of oil and gas in the Black Sea. And from next year is going to be the first producer of gas in the EU after Netherlands will drop its production. But these installations are located very close to the Crimean waters, which are now claimed by Russia, and also close to the war-affected areas at the Black Sea, really literally close, like within 50 miles. Also, now we have an issue in Romania and Bulgaria as well, a large number of dislocated underwater explosive devices, mines, that have reached the shores of Romania and Bulgaria. One of them even exploded in a resort in Romania. And also intense drone activity near the Black Sea shores and at the Danube's mouth. You all heard about the grain deal, about the issue of Ukraine being impeded by Russia to export its grain. This is where the activity takes place nowadays. And of course, there is an intense naval presence of warships and auxiliary military vessels due to the war. But also under the Black Sea, we have a very important pipeline, the Turkish Stream, which is a gas pipeline bringing gas from Russia under the Black Sea to Turkey and further on to other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria or Serbia. It's an important supply mean for these countries. You can imagine that it's raising question about its vulnerability to the military activity in the area. In Mediterranean Sea, it's not simpler as a case. Again, you cannot see the title, I'm sorry for that. In the last year, since 2018, Cyprus discovered natural gas around its southern coast, but Turkey claims some of the Cypriot gas fields. It's interesting because Turkey is one of the 5 countries which did not sign or ratify the United Nations Conventions for the Law of the Sea, which means that it has a different interpretation on the Law of the Sea. Turkey does not recognize Cyprus' right to have exclusive economic zone. And also it claims a part of these fields on behalf of its protege, which is the unrecognized Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. I'm not sure if you know the reality of the conflict, which is the oldest conflict we have in the EU since 1974. The northern part of the Republic of Cyprus is claimed by the Republic of Northern Cyprus. And with this gas, the EU has big plans. It intends to build a gas pipeline, EastMed project, that will bring Cypriot gas to Greece and Italy. Is going to be the most expensive and lengthiest pipeline in history and in the world. It raises a lot of questions about its feasibility, because if you can imagine, if it's so expensive, the gas is going to be expensive as well. Will it be competitive on the market? It's more feasible probably for Cyprus to send the gas via pipeline to Israel than to Europe, to the EU. And the last hot area that we have, it's the North Sea Atlantic zone. Well, this is the most peaceful, let's say, most cooperative and most advanced offshore energy producer part of Europe. Most of the offshore production in Europe takes place here, be it gas, oil, or renewables. But also here we have repeated reports from Denmark, from Norway, from Sweden about suspicious activity of potential espionage activity by Russian ships. Here you can see where they have been spotted, mainly in the vicinity of the wind farms, of the offshore wind farms. And also there's a passage of Russian warships carrying weapons in the Atlantic. Actually, they pass quite frequently close to the Portuguese shores. And it is important to have this area to be safe, to be secure as well, because it is the main offshore producer, as I was saying, in the EU.
But where do the EU and NATO overlap as energy security providers on the old continent? Well, it's a long story, but the EU has been preoccupied with energy security since the Single European Act of 1986. But the worries were accelerated in 2014 because of the Russian annexation of Crimea, and even more exacerbated in 2022, as already mentioned. NATO, on the other hand, has a relatively recent interest in energy security, coming from the ascension of the former communist bloc countries into the alliance in the mid-2000s. The thing is that they had an inherent fear, these former communist bloc countries, they had an inherent fear of Russia and were extremely dependent on Russian energy supplies, and they projected these fears into the alliance. But it should be said that the EU focuses more on non-military aspects of energy security, or security of supply, as it is known. It's a synonym. But it recently got concerned with implications for the defense sector through the European Defense Agency. NATO, on the other hand, is all about the military aspect of energy security. For the alliance, energy security is about sustainable energy supplies to the military and national support for authorities. Since the war in Ukraine, energy security and the protection of critical energy infrastructure found their place in NATO's strategic compass, its Madrid summit communique last year, and this year's Vilnius summit communique.
And to almost reach our conclusions, so what we have identified so far, our research is still ongoing, is that there is a mismatch between narratives and practice, both for the EU and for NATO. There is a sort of a dissonance, if you want, in the two big actors, in the sense that both of them claim a stronger role as energy security providers in Europe. And EU, a traditional market-oriented player, now it adopted a more geopolitical and defense-oriented approach to energy security in the past years. It claims a stronger geopolitical role for itself. NATO, as a military alliance, surprisingly, introduced energy security on its agenda. Energy security used to be more a trade issue. So we're thinking, can we even discuss about the militarization of energy security? On the other hand, we noticed that when Nord Stream explosions occurred, there was confusion about who has the right to intervene. Denmark didn't know if it's them or Poland. Within Denmark, they didn't know, is it the police, is it the Coast Guard, is it the military? And also there is ambiguity in the international law with respect to the right to defend the infrastructure outside of territorial waters. As I was saying, the Convention of the UN is still not clear enough about it. And we notice that there is a lack of capacity and mandate on the EU level. As we all know, the EU does not have an army of its own, but also lack of clarity of what NATO really wants, of how much is willing to do, and as well as mandate, because not all of the countries are NATO members, like Cyprus, for example. And this is the end of our presentation. I hope we managed to respect the time. We're running a bit fast. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Roxana and Dimitar, for having completed your presentation within 50 minutes. And thanks also for the insightful presentation. That I have some questions for you at the end of the panel. So now I pass the floor to Ana Belén, Professor Ana Belén Perianes. For a mistake, she's accredited as associate professor at Universidade Católica Portuguesa, the Catholic University of Portugal, instead of her real university, that is Universidade Geral Gutiérrez Melado de Madrid. Yeah, is it right? So, dear Ana Belén, the floor is yours, please.
So thank you very much to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present in my research. I will speak about EU-Kazakhstan relations, particularly in terms of energy. We know that energy security is very important in terms of geopolitics. One of the major challenges that the EU faces is its energy insecurity. As we know that the energy sector is one of the pillars of growth, competitiveness, and development for modern economies. And because of that, is key to ensure energy supply. I will provide some data. According to the world total energy supply by region, we can see that the EU-27 had only 9.4% as is data. And according to the world energy production by region, we can see that the EU-27 has very low figures, just only 4%, and we can see how important that are for instance, Asia and other regions. We can see how is energy insecurity according to the imports of natural gas. We can see that in 2020, Russia provided 40% of the natural gas, is quite an important number for the European Union. We can see also how important is Norway, Algeria, and other states such as Qatar or the US. Also regarding the imports of crude and oil, we can see also that Russia was really important because in 2020 the EU-27 importing the 25% of all the crude oil and natural liquid gas that needed. So this is a factor that Russia has used in terms of geopolitics, as the EU's energy insecurity has been a major challenge for the state members. I will speak about EU's energy insecurity and later about EU-Kazakhstan relations. I will be very briefly. And we know that Russia has always used EU's energy insecurity as a geopolitical advantage. And we can see that after Russian invasion to Ukraine, the European Union adopted the Repower EU plan. And the goals of this plan were to save energy and also to produce clean energy. And the main goal was to reduce its dependency on Russia's fossil fuels, and diversification is achieving diversification is really important for the European Union. With this plan, Repower EU plan, the European Union is adopting agreements with third countries for pipeline imports, and also a strategic partnership with Namibia, Egypt, also Kazakhstan to work on the supply of renewable hydrogen. And also Egypt and Israel are two important countries in terms of exports of natural gas to Europe. We can see in this figure that in September 2022, the Russian gas was only 18% of all pipeline gas that was imported into the EU. And if we compare this data 21, we can see that this data has been reduced, which is absolutely important for the European Union. Also, liquefied natural gas is being another goal for the European Union to work on its energy security. We can see that adopting this energy is enabling to have a larger pool of suppliers and more flexibility, but there are challenging relationships with exporters of this kind of gas. For instance, Qatar, Algeria, Nigeria, or Egypt, which are countries with quite complicated relations with some state members. And also we can see that Norway and the US has replaced Russia as the main provider of gas. And also the EU member states are accelerating important infrastructure decisions, which is also quite important to have in mind. According to the transit routes, there are transportation challenges that challenge EU's energy security. We can see that about 80% of the oil that Kazakhstan export flow through the Caspian pipeline to the Russian Black Sea terminal. Also, another topic to have in mind is that in this year, in 2023, most of the east-west freight traffic passes to the northern route via Russia. And this is a fact that the European Union is seeking to avoid because of the transit trap for Kazakhstan. This is a quite important challenge for Kazakhstan, and also the maritime route. The third route we can highlight is the Middle Corridor or Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. This is the political will of the European Union. The European Union will to have this route as a viable route. For Kazakhstan, this route will allow a better access to global markets, but this country faces a strong Russian opposition. And I will speak very briefly about EU-Kazakhstan relations. Kazakhstan, as you know, has adopted a multi-vector foreign policy just to maximize geopolitical benefits. It uses pragmatism. Kazakhstan is having relations with Russia, China, and the West. In 2022, Kazakhstan intensified bilateral contacts with Russia, the European Union, China, Turkey, Iran, and other Gulf countries. And we can see that we can read some papers or literature highlighting an anachronistic narrative. This narrative says that explains the Central Asia as a theater of a great game between large global powers, and this statement implies a decrease in Russia influence, but it is frequent to have little attention on Kazakhstan and foreign policy agenda. Kazakhstan has a lot of relevance in terms of oil and gas resources globally. Is the 12th largest in the world in terms of oil reserves, and the 20th largest in the world country in terms of gas resources. I will resume a little bit. There are some key important topics. Kazakhstan is a key oil and gas supplier to the European Union. Also, we can highlight uranium, coal, rare metals, and supposes approximately 70% of its oil exports that are going to the European Union, and this means that this is the 6% of EU oil demand. The European Union really needs to work off its energy diversification, and Kazakhstan also meets more than 21% of the EU uranium demand. And also the European Union is the first foreign director in Kazakhstan, and also invest a lot of money in its oil and gas sector. Also, the EU is Kazakhstan's first trade partner, is the destination of an important percentage of Kazakhstan exports, and the European Union is supposes the 30% of its total external trade. So we can see with these figures data that for the European Union having good relations with Kazakhstan is very important, but also for Kazakhstan. I will highlight some key points and finish with my speech. The European Union will remain only as one of Kazakhstan's many possible partners, and because Kazakhstan has agency and uses it to develop international partnerships. We can see limitations of the partnerships. We can see that they have different idiosyncrasies, forms of governments, different political systems, etc. And we could conclude that the European Union is not an influential actor, not only in Kazakhstan, but also in the rest of the Central Asia. For the European Union, it is important to have flexibility to adapt to the local political environment. Kazakhstan has to face different challenges because Central Asia and Kazakhstan have an important dependency on Russia in terms of energy infrastructure. And for the European Union, it would be very important to have the middle corridor as a viable route, but there are a lot of logistical and investment, etc., and also diplomatic issues, and also has to face with the Russian opposition. And thank you for your time.
Muchísimas gracias, Ana Belén. Muchísimas gracias. And now I think that we miss, so we are not in hurry. There's no need to rush because I think that we miss one presentation. Yeah. I think that Iancu, Miruna, and the Moldovan Bogdaa are not, no, neither online. No, not at all. Okay. So we have more. Yeah. Are you online? Bogdan? Bogdan, give us a sign of your presence.
Yeah, he's there. Yeah.
Very well. So yeah, I can see.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Hi, welcome. Sorry, but
Unfortunately, my teacher can be with us tonight because of a personal problem, but I can present the presentation. That's
okay. So thanks very much, Moldovan. Do you have some slides or not?
No.
Okay, so you do not need the technical support. So please contain your presentation if you can within 15 minutes. Okay.
Sure.
I will warn you 3 minutes before your time expires. So the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you. So the psychopolitical meaning of Russia constant phobia security in international relationships. For the beginning, with the present paper intends to highlight the psychopolitical meaning of constant paradigm of phobia security that dominates and characterize Russia's main decisions and actions implemented in the external register. Within such referential optics, we consider appropriate to decant in first instance the political, psychological, conceptual significance and essence. Political psychology is without question a fascinating and deeply complex science. It deals with the most profoundly impactful patterns concerning the paradigm of actions and behavioral models within the realm of politics. Furthermore, this science suppressed all of the theories and conceptual ideas within the domain of political science by virtue of applying its inquisitive prism to a constellation of vastly different elements compared to those previously held responsible for actions and undertaking within the sphere of politics. Semantically, as well as in other aspects, the allure of the unfamiliar character of political psychology incites the interest of any person, whether a layman or an initiate. Questions such as "what is this?" or statements such as "I hadn't known such a science exists" are quite familiar within the national and international scientific stage. Evidently, political psychology is a science unlike any other. It is altogether remarkable, owing to its deeply complex analytical and interpretive repertoire. This aspect implies the following: beyond placing within the essence of its analytical core the binomial consisting of psychology, political science, political psychology also encompasses other fundamental branches of knowledge. In other words, it means that any foray into or attempt of delineating the object of political psychology will entail the high criterion of multidisciplinarity, which pretends that psychologists, philosophers, linguists, logicians, historians, and others alike can no longer ignore each other, but rather they outgo to collaborate towards the common goal of distinguishing the scientific essence of the discipline in question. Given the incontestable premise, we can assert the fact that in its most elementary acceptation, political psychology is a science of substance and of multidisciplinary nature, which established itself at the border between psychology and political sciences, whose analytical repertoire targets the recognition and comprehension of the dynamic psychological aspect of the political ethos. In its scientific dimension, political psychology is a specialized branch of psychology which investigates the relevant psychological and socio-psychological particularities, both of an individual level as well as a collective level of those involved in political activities and actions, the motivation behind political action, the impact of psychological factors on political processes, events, and incidents, as well as their impact in the psychological traits of the individual or of the collective. In summary, political psychology teaches and aids us to delve into the psychology context of the political universe with its breadth of constellation and connotations and nuances, greatly contributing to the identification of problematic behavior patterns and replacing them with prominently beneficial ones. Starting from all these factors and pivotal elements, we can conclude that political psychology gives us the opportunity to truly discover what lies within the dimension of political actions and behaviors. In other words, we can better understand that the root of apparent attitudes and actions undertaken by individuals within the sphere of politics does not constitute of rational arguments or predictable patterns of expression, but rather it is found within the range of personality traits and attitude, as well as within the individual's sum of values and personal beliefs. Consequently, and due to the fact that the present paper is completely submissed to a political psychology approach, in order to better understand the manner in which Russia, in its different forms of state evolution, has been dominated by a significant and real state of insecurity with regards to its foreign and military policy, we consider proper to decant the concept of ontological security. In the past 2 decades, the concept of ontological security has had significant impact on the theoretization of how and why states interact in the way they do. While traditional accounts of state security refer to physical safety, security as survival and protecting the territory integrity of the state, ontological security instead focuses on the relationship between a state's collective identity and the feelings of security. For this reason, ontological security is often described as security as being. This type of security is built on national stories and institutionalization routines and relations with other states, which stress the need for individuals to continuously answer existential questions about the self and the social and material outside world. The concept of ontological security is thus used in international relations to explain how and why actors in the world of politics construct their selves through narratives and routinized behaviors in relation to other actors, and how these then affect and can explain political outcomes. So the Russia phobia derives from a state of heightened fear maintained over a long period of time. Fear is one of the basic emotions, which paradoxically fulfills the role of keeping us safe. However, a generalized state of fear over an extended period of time can seriously damage a person's mental and emotional health, and exactly the same can be applied when we are speaking about a state. In the modern world, fear has lost the value and importance it had in the pre-modern period. However, there are some states that were formed based on fear and build their entire existence based on it. Russia is one of these states, and its leaders are afraid, so they will try with more or less success to create fear around them with the mentality you can be attacked if you are already attacking or if you are already the aggressor. The Kremlin leader clearly expressed this attitude in the meeting with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2007 when Putin bring his dog, even if he knew that the German Chancellor is very afraid of dogs. Russia's geography and history show us where this security phobia comes from and how we can better understand this if we understand the geography and the history. So geographically speaking, Russia is the largest country by area and landmass, but it has a real problem in terms of border security because it has no natural borders like long rivers or big mountains. In the west, there lies the Northern European plain, a flat expanse of land where it was invaded in the past by Napoleon and also by the Nazi Germany in the Second World War. And in the south, the Black Sea has always represented the only access to international waters, which don't freeze in the winter, but also the playground of conflicts with the Ottoman Empire and later Turkey. So the Black Sea represents a very important zone for Russia and Russia's security. The southern steppes represent the gateway through which the Mongols entered in what could be considered the first invasion that Russia ever faced, and the Caucasus region is greatly instable, generated by the ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity of the population in the area, which is heterogeneous. In the east, there is still the trauma of the invasion from the Japanese. So we can see a lot of problems with the geography and the history of Russia that can lead to this kind of security phobia. In addition, Russia has a big problem from a demographic point of view. Ethnically, Russians are in minority right now with a declining aging population that is no longer reproducing, while the Muslim population in different areas of the country are growing. Being an aging population, the labor force and specialists in different fields are fewer and fewer. So this is leading to an economic decline in Russia. Historically, Russia has always had this fear of potential invasion, but also the desire to be treated at least as a great power by the rest of the world. Every political, military, and economic action of Russia, regardless of the historical moment we are referring to, aimed to assert itself as a great power economically, military, and politically. The repeated invasions that I mentioned before, but also the geography of the country could represent enough reasons to make Russia expect a new invasion soon. However, the country is represented by the sum of personalities who are at its leadership. So the story behind them will have a role in the decisions they will make. Most of those who are in the leadership position in Russia have well-rooted roots in the communist period, and their core values and personality structures was for sure marked by this period. We come to the last actions of Russia, where we see how these leaders applied the same methods as Stalin applied. For example, after the Russo-Finnish War, Stalin immediately established a puppet government that was easy to control from Moscow, very similar to how Putin action in Donbass and Crimea in the past years. There were also moments when Russia did not feel welcome among the Western countries. Russia wanted to join NATO in 2000, but without going through the standard process of joining, which had to affirm the great power status desired by Russia. So Russia will continue to be captive in this security phobia, which will not let it to become the desired great power. However, it will continue to exist in one way or another and represent the main enemy of the United States and NATO, an enemy without which the existence of NATO would become more or less meaningless. And
sorry for interrupting, Moldovan. Try to go to conclusions within 1 minute, if possible. Thanks.
I just finished. That was the last sentence. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your insightful presentation, Moldovan. And thanks for having joined our panel, albeit virtually or remotely, but it's a hybrid conference. So, and last but not least, we have another familiar face to me, Professor Farian Sabahi from Subra University where I taught for 3 years. So it's a well-known institution. So thanks very much for joining us from Italy. And please, if you're able to contain your presentation within 15 minutes, I would be very grateful. And we will take all the questions at the end of your presentation. So without any further delay, the floor is yours, Farian.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud. Clear and loud.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. Unfortunately, I have not been able to join you because we had exams today in Varese. I would like to thank the organizers for this kind invitation. Hope to join you in the future in Lisbon. As an academic, as well as a professional journalist, writing and broadcasting for the Italian media, in the last 12 months, I've been covering the movement Women, Life, Freedom. And in my presentation tonight, I'll focus on how the protest triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini affected the JCPOA. The title of my presentation is the JCPOA, the state of the art and its implications between diplomacy and public security. Mahsa Amini was Iranian. She was an ethnic Kurd, and ethnic minorities do not enjoy full rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran. She was based in Saga, a city in Iranian Kurdistan. Last year, exactly in these days, in mid-September, she was in Tehran, in the Iranian capital, with her family, her parents, and her brother for a holiday before starting the academic year. She was studying biotechnologies and she wanted to become a doctor. On September 13, 2022, Masamini was stopped by the morality police while she was exiting a metro station in Tehran. She was stopped by the Gasht Irshad, the morality police, which checks how you're dressed, if you comply with the dress code of the Islamic Republic. 3 days later, on September 16th, Masamini died. Her parents resisted pressure and they buried her in Saqqez, her hometown in Iranian Kurdistan. We have been told that she has been brutally beaten by the morality police while she was in custody. The Iranian authorities declared she had a heart attack. The two journalists, female journalists who reported her arrest and her death are still in jail. What happened afterwards? Her death triggered what can be considered the most important protest since 1979, since the revolution of 1979. The West thought that these demonstrations would lead to structural changes or even to the collapse of the reigning government. But as far as we can say, this is not the case. My thesis is that attempts to revive the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, have failed also meaning that this is not the only reason, also because the US and its Western allies have dragged their feet, hoping that the Iranian government would either completely collapse or at least be under severe pressures because of the movement Woman, Life, Freedom. However, a year later, the protests are over, we can say. The main keywords now are civil disobedience, meaning that Iranians are no longer taking the streets in big numbers. Rather, Iranian women are going out, they're going shopping, they're taking they're driving, they're taking the metro without wearing the veil, and they're well aware of the risk. Going a step backward, just the timeline, the main 3 steps of the nuclear deal. The JCPOA was signed on July 14th, 2015. On the 8th of November 2018, the US President Donald Trump unilaterally exited the nuclear deal. He said that he wanted a new nuclear deal with Iran, taking into account the Iranian ballistic program. What Trump was trying to do was to outlaw the possibility that Iran could have its own missiles. However, I'm an historian. I teach contemporary history of the Middle East in Varese. And historians are well aware of the reasons why Iran cannot give up its missile program, mainly because history taught the Iranian leadership that nobody will sell missiles to Iran. That happened in the Iran-Iraq War 1980, 1988. No country was willing to sell missiles to Iran. The third step in the timeline, which is very important, is May 2019. Iran increased the uranium enrichment in defiance of the nuclear deal. So the Iranian authorities waited a whole year before increasing uranium again. What were the Iranian authorities waiting for? The Iranian authorities were waiting for the European Union to make a move, because the European Union was supposedly engaged in the JCPOA, but they dared not to get involved in business with Iran. When on May 8, 2018, Trump declared that the nuclear deal was over, he didn't want to respect it any longer, all European companies left Iran. And more international sanctions were imposed on the country. So what's the state of the art now? Where are we now? According to BBC Monitoring Service, there is a news of September 3rd, 2023. Tehran, and I'm quoting, Tehran and Washington are working on a document meant to replace the Iran nuclear deal. Iran's foreign minister has stated in an interview with the moderate Etelat Daily, published on September 3rd, the Iranian minister announced that the indirect negotiations with the US over a new document were an initiative proposed by Oman. The US government has yet to comment on the Iranian side's statement. The Iranian foreign minister suggested that the new arrangement, which is dubbed the September document, will carry amendments to the contents of the original JCPOA signed in 2015, but from which the US departed 3 years later under President Donald Trump. Here, a major role is played by Oman. Oman does play a major role in negotiating, in the negotiations between Iran and the US. Again, let's use history as a tool. On November 9th, 2014, US Secretary of State John Kerry and Catherine Ashton of the EU met in Muscat with the Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, and that gave a big push to the JCPOA. I mentioned that there are several reasons why the JCPOA has not been revived. So at least, as I already mentioned, the JCPOA has failed mainly because the US and its Western allies have dragged their feet, hoping that the Iranian government would either completely collapse or at least be under severe pressure. Secondly, the Biden administration has been tight-lipped on resuming negotiations because of two reasons. First of all, because the Biden administration fears that going back to talk to Iran would damage its chances of a re-election in 2024. And secondly, the Biden administration has used a waiver for banks to transfer $6 billion in frozen Iranian oil funds without fear of US sanctions. And that's, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There are many hostages in Iranian jails. Some of them are American, some of them have dual citizenship, Iranian and American. Plus, there are Iranian citizens detained in the US because of business of materials which can have a dual use, civil and military. So what happened recently is that 5 American citizens detained in Iran have been released, and 5 Iranian citizens detained in the US will be released as well. But moreover, what people are talking about in Iran is the fact that $6 billion will be released from South Korea, and these $6 billion had been frozen because of US sanctions. They will be the Biden administration will allow this money to go back to Iran. This money is money made by the Iranians by selling oil to South Korea. South Korea had a waiver, and meaning that they were allowed to buy Iranian oil even though Iran was under US and international sanctions. So one of the reasons why many countries stopped doing business with Iran was the fear of secondary sanctions, because the US sanctions do not hit only American companies, but they also hit European and companies belonging to other countries. So what now? As far as we can see, the Islamic Republic has not fallen. Given the Western sanctions on Iran, Ayatollahs and the Pasaran pursued their neighborhood policy, meaning that they aimed to improve relations with neighbors. And the policy they adopted is the policy of looking to the east. And I will make a few examples. Iran has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Hassan Raisi, the president of Iran, was actually Ibrahim Raisi, was in Samarkand exactly a year ago when Mahsa Amini was arrested and when she died. So the idea was to work towards finally joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And the death of Mahsa Amini, in a way, put shadow on this major diplomatic achievement of the Iranian president. Second example on of the policy of looking to the east. In March 2023, China was able to push Saudi Arabia towards Iran, and thanks to Beijing, diplomatic relations resumed. They broke in January 2016 when the Saudi Ayatollah Nimr al-Nimr was crucified and then beheaded by the Saudi authorities. He was too outspoken as a member of the Shia community of Saudi Arabia. The third example of the policy of looking to the east of the Iranian authorities is the fact that in August 2023, BRICS members decided to invite Iran and 5 other countries to join the bloc. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are inviting Iran to join BRICS. In conclusion, the US and Europe miscalculated the unrest in Iran, and we lost the opportunity. We really lost the opportunity to reach an agreement. Just one final note. I think that we often forget that Iran is the heir of the Persian Empire. Politicians and analysts from the US, from Europe, must not forget that the idea of Iran, the idea of empire, does indeed shape the politics of the Islamic Republic today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Farian. Thanks very much. Thanks to all the panelists for having contained the presentation within 50 minutes. So we have 10 minutes for question time. Yeah. So we open up the floor for questions. We should have a floating mic here in the room. Yeah. I asked the technical support whether they can bring enter into the room. Yeah. Thanks very much. The mic is coming.
Good afternoon, Carlos Leon, Open University of Lisbon. I wanted to ask a question regarding the last sentence of the presentation we just heard about the inheritance of the Persian Empire. Regarding the Islamic Republic of Iran inheritance of the empire, where does that empire is moving to now? Is it in line with your previous observation that it's going to Eastern policy? Thank you.
Farian? Farian, are you still there? For another cyber attack, maybe? No, no, she's gone. You know, we are live, so this kind of things happen. So if you want to head your question to another, I know, I think you're there. Okay, okay. Can you please reply to the answer? To the question, pardon.
Sorry, Marco, as a speaker, I'm not able to open my microphone. That's what Zoom is saying. So, the idea of the Persian Empire is actually what the Islamic Republic is doing, meaning that their power is actually going beyond the borders of Iran. I recently went to Lebanon I went there at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, and it was there in the month of August. And there you do perceive, the influence of Iran with the influence of Hezbollah in the south. Iran has a big influence in Iraq. It's trying to play around with the Taliban in Afghanistan and so on, and also in Central Asia. Iran, from the historical point of view, is if you speak Persian, you can speak Persian in Lebanon. You can speak Persian in Samarkand and Bukhara. So the idea, Ayatollahs and Pastaran, they don't really want to be stuck between the borders of Iran. They know that they need, for their own survival, to extend their power in neighboring countries and also somewhere else. When the movement Woman Life Freedom was at its aid, the authorities were really scared by the fact that they could be overthrown, and many of them moved their family to Venezuela. So they're trying to play, diplomacy far beyond the Middle East. And they don't want to be crushed by the US in the corner. They want to play big. And in this sense, if the only available allies are in the east, they are turning east at the moment. They would rather prefer to play to have Europe as an ally, also because they desperately need the technology from not only from Europe. Actually, when it comes to oil, they desperately need American technology, but they can't get it at the moment. So it's there's a book which is The Idea of Iran by Gerardo Gnoli, which is one of the biggest. I think it's about pre-Islamic Iran, but it really gives an idea. It's in English. The Idea of Iran, Gerardo Gnoli. It gives an idea of the historical roots of the idea of the empire. I hope I answered your question, Carlos.
Thanks very much for your answer. More questions for the audience? Professor Roman Dag, please.
Hi, thank you for all presentations, but I have a question to Roxana and Dimitri. They have just very good coordinated presentation, and it was congratulations for you. And the question goes to also Annabelle and Perianes, because it's about energy security. I had a discussion with my colleagues in Turkey, and then we have decided that, okay, after the Russian-Ukraine war, European Union, they tried to diversify energy resources and decrease the dependency on the gas, Russian gas. So, do you think that increase the number of the U.S. share in the EU energy dependency? Because now I think the U.S. declared that they are going to supply LNG, liquefied natural gas, and they are buying it from the Qatar, I think. But still, the most increase happened in the U.S. share in EU energy consumption. So, does the Russian-Ukraine war just change the actor in terms of the dependence on natural gas from Russia to U.S.? Because that was also claimed by the Russian Foreign Minister and the presidential speaker in that time. So I just want to hear your ideas if that's the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really love this question. Just to give you a bit of approximate numbers, not exact because I don't have it here with me. After the start of the war in Ukraine, it is true that the import of American LNG doubled in the EU from 26 roughly to 58, I think, billion cubic meters. And being sometimes shale gas based, this raises also the question of how green this LNG is in the end, because you talk about the green energy transition. But it's also interesting, I just saw it last week, that it's true that we import less pipeline Russian gas since the war in Ukraine, 15% in comparison to 41 before the war, but we also import much more LNG from Russia. Actually, in the first 6 months of this year, the EU absorbed 52% of all Russian LNG exported. And not only that it's more, but it's also more expensive because LNG, it's traded in the market. We have the spot prices, which are very volatile and they are very high now after the war. So then I had another look to see the revenues for the Russian budget, and they're constant. So they do export less pipeline gas to the EU, but they earn the same money. So the quantity is less, but the price being higher, the revenues for the Russians are constant, even a bit above the 2021. So it's business as usual for the Russian government. No, for them, no. So if you look at the numbers, for them, nothing changed. For us in the European Union and in our partner countries, it's changed because we pay more. And we all feel now the difference in our pockets, right?
Thanks very much. More questions? Yeah, please.
What do you say, Union European? How level is the dependence of Poland and Germany? Professor Roxana, Dimitar, Anna, Belén, anyone? How we can say Union European? How level the Germany and the Poland into Union European the dependency of gas? Because Union European, 27 countries, right? And the two subjects treated Union European. But I would like to know if Poland and Germany have a different kind of treatment.
So I'm sorry. I have considered this research regarding the EU as a global level. I'm sorry.
Currently, it's only Hungary that it's not bound by the European ban on Russian gas and oil.
We still don't have a ban on gas.
Eh?
We still don't have sanctions against gas. So nobody's banned by gas. I can tell about Poland. For example, when last year the Russian gas exports to Poland were cut, Poland was not that much affected because Poland had already taken steps to diversify its supplies before that. So now Poland is importing gas from Norway through this undersea Baltic pipe, and it's also investing more in renewables, and it's also investing in liquefied natural gas in LNG terminals, and it's going to build even more. And even Bulgaria, Dimitar can tell you maybe even more because he's from there. Bulgaria was 100% almost, right, dependent on Russian gas, but even Bulgaria has some alternatives. So dependency is something very relative. We can say, for example, that Finland used to be 100% dependent on Russian gas. But when we look on how much gas Finland uses in its economy, we say that it's less than 10%. So even if all the gas imported in Finland was Russian, Finland didn't depend so much on gas altogether. So dependency is always relative if we look at the energy mix.
If I can pose a question maybe to Carlo, who wants to take the question, is about energy and democracy, because the Western powers declared a ban on Russian oil, but afterwards we're still importing through these pipelines that comes to Europe. We are still and also we do not want, I mean, West European countries do not want energy supplies passing through Belarus also, because these countries are considered ruled by dictators. So I consider dictatorships according to European standards, Western standards. But we are still importing gas and oil from countries that, according to the same standards, are not considered democratic countries. And Roman has just understood where I want to go to the point. I'm talking about Azerbaijan, maybe also Turkey, depends, because you know there's the issue about Cyprus. Someone you talked about Cyprus, yeah, of course. This is I mean Cyprus is another question on the table of the European Union and blocked the accession of Turkey to the European Union. So I mean there is a double standard. Is there a double standard? we are dealing with towards Russia and Belarus on one side and other countries, we are still importing, like Saudi Arabia. We cannot say that Saudi Arabia, I mean, the US Congress and so on accused the current prime minister of having master pupped the killing of journalist, dissident journalist Khashoggi in the embassy in Istanbul. So, I mean, is there a double standard? We do a set, on which basis we do a set supplies, energy supplies from which countries, according to which standards and so on? I mean, I think that this is a relevant question.
If I may, absolutely. Yes, I think that this is kind of a hypocrisy, because what can we say about Qatar, Arabia Saudi? We have different values. They treat very bad women, gay people, we can, etc. So what can I say? Hypocrisy. Because at the end, we can think that what the states or the countries want to achieve is to achieve their national interest, national security goals, and this is what happens in international relations. They are guided by hypocrisy, in my view.
Yeah. You know, a couple of weeks ago, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was in Tunisia to close an agreement for importing gas from Tunisia. That, of course, I mean, it doesn't amount to it. It's not considered a democratic country according to European standards. So I agree with you that there is a double standard that is hypocrisy. Yeah. Maybe.
Debatable, but more to the yes. Pretty much, yeah, nothing to say here.
I think that it's called geopolitics or something like that. Yeah,
it's realpolitik. Yeah. It's realpolitik. The interest drives the things.
This is the usual. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. So, do you have any more questions for our panelists? No questions. So, yeah, so I think that yes, some more questions, but I think that it's time to dinner, more or less. I think that we are all very tired. I mean, I'm talking about people who is here since this morning early, like me. But to be sincere, I must tell that this was the best panel of the late afternoon. Yeah. So thanks very much to all the panelists, the one participating in person here on site, and the three panelists participating online. And we hope to host you in person for the next edition of the CESRAN conference that turned his 10th anniversary. So congratulations to the organization and to the CESRAN conference. Thanks very much, everybody, and see you tomorrow. Thanks.